Welcome back. We are in Matthew 16 and we're now doing part 2 of chapter 16, and this is verse 5 through 12. When they went across the lake, the disciples forgot to take bread. Now, keep in mind, he has just left these Pharisees and Sadducees who were looking for a sign, and we're going to see that play into this. Be careful, Jesus said to them. Be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Of course, he's referencing to this conversation they just had. But the disciples are kind of fixated, apparently, on the fact that they have no bread. And so they discussed this among themselves and said, it is because we didn't bring any bread. And I just think it's funny because I'm thinking they are very focused on the fact that we forgot the bread. We forgot the bread. How can Jesus perform a miracle if we have no bread? He can't even, he doesn't even have any resources now to solve this problem. And whatever the reason that they are still not getting what Jesus has been trying to teach them, they are fixated on this bread. Jesus has just talked about he's guarding against the yeast, the Pharisees and Sadducees. They're, of course, going to the physical aspects of we have no bread. Therefore, there can't be any miracles. We just saw 2 miracles happen with everything being multiplied, and now we don't even have anything to give him. But aware of their discussion in verse 8, Jesus asked, You of little faith, why are you talking among yourselves about having no bread? Do you still not understand? Don't you remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000, and how many basketfuls you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000, and how many basketfuls you gathered? How is it you don't understand that I was not talking to you about bread? But be on your guard against the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Then they understood that he was not telling them to guard against the yeast used in bread, but against the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. So, duh! Why aren't you getting this? But I feel like Jesus probably could have been, if he were no, he was human. I'm not saying that he wasn't human. He was fully human and fully God. But the human part, I wonder how much kicked in, going, seriously, guys? Because this keeps coming up. You're not getting it, and you're not getting it. You're not getting it. That repetition that we talked about just last week, about almost like a deja vu thing, where it keeps reoccurring. 1, let's either build up muscle memory, or 2, if you're not getting the lesson, then we got to repeat the lesson. Maybe it's both. But, of course, Jesus is not talking about the fact that they didn't have a bread, and he could perform a miracle with whatever the resources were. And he tried to stress that point before. Whatever you have, just give it to me. But this was not the point of the conversation here. In a few chapters ago, we talked about the kingdom of heaven being like yeast, and that it transforms the loaf and it completely remakes it into something else. But here, and that was in the positive, but here is in the negative connotation again, which we had seen in the Old Testament about the leaven and the sin. Well, here he's kind of bringing that in again. That bad yeast, be careful of bad yeast, because bad yeast will contaminate. It's just as pervasive as with the kingdom of heaven. You have 2 kingdoms that are at war with each other. Who's going to win? If you have good yeast that is for the kingdom of heaven, it will spread, it will transform, and it will change the world. But just like that, so is the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees, because this is a religious spirit, and it gets into the church, it gets into the body of Christ, and it can contaminate, it leads people astray, it transforms the loaf as well, just as much as the other. And it can put a bad taste for bread, for the bread of life, in people's mouth, because this is what they associate bread to taste like. And if this is all they've had, they've never tasted of the good of taste and see that the Lord is good. If they've never tasted of that, then they don't know the counterfeit. They don't know that this religious spirit that makes bad bread is that. They see that this is who God is. So be careful of that, and understand that there are two types of bread that call themselves Christ followers or the church. One that will contaminate and lead astray and ruin, and the other which is actually true and good and all God. So be careful. This is what Jesus is telling his disciples. Be careful of the bad yeast, that which the Pharisees and Sadducees teach, that religious spirit that destroys and leads his sheep astray. Okay, and we'll pick up here again tomorrow and to a little bit of a longer part that's quite fascinating.